Chapter 1, Deja Vu.
Okay, so infrequent uploads but there's the computer died a couple of times since last episode. So, and then it got fixed, and then it died. After I recorded 15 hours of footage and thought I almost lost it, but it's fixed. And I didn't lose any footage. So let's get into this. So, in the previous episode, we managed to beat World 1. And the first world in Digimon, World 4, which is when we search for us, is Digimon or Death Bomb. And then I learned, after I killed the property man, turned off the console, and then waited till my computer come back. And then I recorded 50 hours of footage, and I started off, looking around for almost 2 hours trying to troubleshoot what happened, because I wasn't getting the new zone like I should, or the text dialogue to initiate the quest to start the next up. And then it came to me, oh yeah, the game wasn't properly loaded in places, and it heavily relies on console memory as the thing that saves progress, or the illusion of progress, if you will, like tracks and dungeons, for example. Those being triggered is saved on the console memory. So, what I learned was the defeat of any boss that doesn't drop a key item will not finish the story unless it's actually a specific NPC before you turn off the console. And if you do, you see where this is going. I had to do the entire last dungeon all over again. So, yeah, it started with Deja Vu. And this chapter's not Deja Vu just for recap. It's Deja Vu because I already experienced this before. And the thing is, I'm doing a lot of this LP from memory, from when I tried to beat it years ago before my original PS2 went down and lost the memory card. And it also destroyed the original copy of the game I had. So, womp womp. Yeah, so one had to do the first dungeon all over again. And just so you guys know, none of the footage has actually been cut. All of it has been fast forward to maintain a 2-hour duration. And memory serves correct, I didn't cut any footage, unless you count the frames of the removal of frames due to fast forwarding a lot of this. So, I went to Death Valley. I went down to the also, only finished working recording is, if you look, when that in that boat scene of what I captured, the player still had momentum as if the boat was still moving. And I noticed that in editing, but it's so slow to the naked eye, I didn't really notice it when recording. But it's really noticeable if you sped up the game at least 300%. The other thing of what makes this 100% of this game really hard is the fact that a lot of it is actually contrived bullshit. And players So it's actually getting harder and harder to play this game as I play it. And like I said, I played this get the loot. And by the way, none of the damages are actually beneficial for you. So your time is best spent grinding dungeons for both experience and loot. And that's actually not what dungeons are supposed to be. You know, dungeons are supposed to be good loot, money, resources, bits to use. But in this game, they literally just shat the bed for all the traditional RPG mechanics. And so they lazily slapped together system. Alright, now we start the fetch quest nonsense, and for this part I didn't fetch it. I actually wanted to read what was since we are enemies with a which is bad because this entire world is made out of so getting attacked by someone who's like, oh you know, they can also just randomly make it so that and the most contrived way of this world is gave us an idea that it is the defense system. Because they weren't being attacked at the moment. But shouldn't that always be on? Especially if you think there's an enemy right there, let's go look around and find them and hunt them down and kill them. Why don't, if you're in this scenario, why aren't the security systems on at all times? That's like the White House not having a stand because it's harder there. But she also gave us the key and the power to initiate anything information. Which if you don't know is digimon, not in the lore of this game, but in the lore of the general one digimon. These ones are high artists, usually entrusted into reading digimon and protecting the server and hunting no, not those 7 deadly sins. Those 7 deadly sins. No, not those 7 deadly sins. Yes. So, now we movie, if you remember that. It was exclusively in Japan. Alice in the cable exclusive movie. I forget the name of it. I think it's I forgot its name, but it was the very first the full depiction of the is one of the holy digimon that are actually entrusted to run the digital world, and you just have him in a tin can fucking mothballed until you need him? No, no, no! Why even put him in a fucking tin can to begin with? Healing, probably, but in this game, none of the Digimon in the digital server that you see walking around, including the Digi-Elves, have actually seen real battle. Because Seraftimon and Ophanimon protect the zone and fight most intruders on site. And that's the story of the video game. But Ophanimon was too fucking lazy to get off her ass and then free her partner, who was mothballed for some unknown godly reason. But yeah, that is probably one of the most stupid bits of story I have seen. Even for this game. And not only that, but this is literally the story of halfway into this game. I mean, not even halfway. This is just one of the biggest exhibitions.
Chapter 2, Dawn of a New Grind.
Alright, so now we're doing the grind proportion, which has been sped up by about like 1,500 maybe? No, 5,000? I don't know how to do... I know. Multiplication of compounding percentiles has never been my strong suit. Especially considering I had to render this video not once but twice to apply another bit of layer of fast forward to this section, because this is actually the bulk of all the footage. And for those of you who don't know, this game is very poorly balanced and heavily contrived against the player. And especially if you're playing single player, because they balance the entire game on the notion that you're going to be playing with at least 4 players at all times, and thus, if one of you dies, the other one can revive you with revive discs and other items when you run out. So, all the bosses also have a one-shot ability for the level that you're supposed to kill them at. So, especially in single player, if you don't want to, oh, I don't know, spend almost an hour and a fucking half to actually get to a dungeon, just be obliterated by the final boss, and then have to make the entire trek all over again, but without any enemies to kill. You probably want to, especially if you're doing single player like I am, it's actually recommended to be fucking over leveled to such of a degree that the bosses can no longer one shot you or two shot you. Especially the final boss. And it's also recommended to do all your grinding before you even get in the front door. And yeah, after I was done playing the recording, I felt like I over leveled myself until I looked at the footage and that it actually took me almost 30 minutes to kill the final boss, but I zoned out to such of a degree that it only felt like 30 seconds from memory. Yeah, this game has that sort of weird effect on me where I literally either underestimate the time I actually spent or grossly forget huge proportions of time that I completely forgot about or did not notice when recording the gameplay. Also, it's recommended. Sorry about that. For grinding, it's recommended to grind those spawners that spawn the crescent moon robots. The enemy design is a mixture of Digimon and artificial Digimon that aren't actually Digimon but are constructs made by other Digimon. Fuck it. They're also made out of data, but they don't have a soul. You know, golems. No, not that one. No, not that one. Yes, that one. But, yeah. So, and this premise was actually further expanded upon in a little bit of Digimon Season 3, where they make a horse for Gallantmon. And in Season 5, where they make a Men in Black scenario. Heavily recommend that season. It's actually probably one of the best ever Digimon series. That isn't the best due to just nostalgia's sake. But that one has really good writing, really good character design, and actual really good bits and bobs to actually sticking straight as an arrow to the actual lore of Digimon. And yeah, It's also the only one I remember not being that derived to cliche or character development arcs that have been done multiple times. In other anime or being popularized the shit out of. So, yeah, you want to grind at these spawners that spawn enemies for 15 minutes. And if you kill them as fast as they spawn, it will take 15 minutes to kill them. But only when you get to overleveled to a point where you can one-shot the enemy. And on this little ridge, yeah, there's a little ridge that the enemies can't get to you at. So if you use, I mean, it's recommended to grind your gun exclusively there and just kill as many of them as you can with the gun to increase your shot ability, which as a little reminder for those of you at home who are new to this series, every weapon has its own contrived stat, which which you can get by using that particular weapon. For example, we're talking about guns, so if you use a gun, you have a chance to get a 1 point value in the use of that weapon, and all of the point values go towards allowing you to upgrade your weapon. And you can't equip a weapon that you don't meet the requirements for. You know, simple stuff until you realize that the entire game is completely based around this system. When it comes to weapons, are completely based around the system, and all the weapons are either the same or different. All the weapons in this game are almost the exact same, besides the shot pistols, which are guns. And the only difference is one-handed weapon and dual-wielding massive weapons. Yeah. So, the other contrived bit of the token, the stat, is the more of this stat you have, the easier it is to get. And you're given a random chance to get a point in the stat. If you use the weapon to hit an enemy every time, you have a small chance to get it, which that chance increases based off of how many points you have. And depending on what level you are, you're capped out at a plus 20 points to your cap every level you have. So currently, so for example, if you're level 10, your maximum point value in any of those stats is... let's go with 10. So, at level 10, your maximum would be, if I do the math correctly, 200. And that almost sums up the grind proportion. I also started to, grind with the Mummymon spawner. But, yeah. End.
Chapter 3 Sandy Labyrinth of Dry Lawns.
Alright, so we're going to actually start doing Dungeon 1. And, for those of you who skipped the grinding section, I decided to grind at that place to try and kill all the Mummymon to kill the spawner. Because every spawner in this game doesn't infinitely produce enemies. If you kill all the enemies as they spawn for an X amount of time, the spawners will self-destruct. But online, they said it takes about 30 to 40 minutes. I spent almost an hour at that one spawner to try and get footage of it self-destructing. Never got it to self-destruct, so I said, fuck it, let's just, you know, oh, I don't know, continue on the game. And killed him. Killed the spawner. And now we're in the dungeon. Also, from editing this video, I've learned that not all the dungeons have the same texture, but a lot of the textures on the floor and walls are actually the same for the world. So, this dungeon looks completely different from any of the other dungeons in World 1, but all the dungeons in World 2 look so similar to this one that it's either A, forgettable, or have been, you as the player have been overexposed to it, that it no longer seems unique, and it looks exactly the same. And all of the floor tile designs and wall designs are so similar that it's almost as if they literally took the texture into Photoshop and just chroma keyed it to a different color hue. But what I will give them in this is, for the Sandy Labyrinth, not only did they add patches of sand on the floor design, but they also have an area filled with nothing but quicksand, but that's a spoiler. So, one of the main gripes I have in this entire area, but especially with this dungeon, Minotaurmon. And the thing is, you want to kill the Minotaurmon before he gets up and then goes in there, or else it will magically heal itself by drinking the forbidden elixir, healing itself to full health, and boosting its magic attack speed and attack damage and area of effect to such of a degree that it is actually easier and better to kill them before they have a chance to go to the well. Also, if you kill them when they're in that corner, you can't get any of the drops because you as the player are not allowed to go near the face. Also, Mummymon, I know there is a status effect system in this game, but it's also contrived in bullshit. So if you're playing Agumon or Diomon, they have Petty Fire as an attack. And if you use it on a Mummymon, you'll see one of the only status effects in the game besides Stun. And that is Burn. Or that's what I would call it, if it actually did damage to the Mummymon. It doesn't. It just heavily increased their attack damage and add flat fire to their attack. You know, fire damage. Oh, and it also increases their movement speed and attack speed. So it's almost like you didn't debuff the enemy at all, but heavily buffed it to such of a degree that it kicks your ass and causes you to die and have to do the dungeon all over again, including walking to it. And if you have a little brother who's playing this game with you, or another person who non-stops using Petty Fire just to piss you off, just let them get killed by the Mummymon they set on fire and tell them, Well, you shouldn't set them on fire. That makes them more difficult to kill. Please stop. Also, the Mummymon from this spawner actually have a high amount of XP, and they do drop loot, but the main reason why I was killing the ones on the overworld, they have a high, they have a slightly lower experience gain, but by far they drop the highest amount of items. And in that grind section, I managed to collect almost every card in the game that is not exclusively drop exclusive to any card pack in difficulty 2, 3, and 4, if there is a 4. So I practically managed to collect all the digital cards in that montage, minus the exclusive ones that you can only collect in higher difficulties than what one is already done. Also, I recommend, if you're playing Digimon in this area, to use Petty Bind. Also, I've managed to upgrade my magic ability. And now it shoots 2 homing missiles instead of 1, but at the cost of the mana cost being tripled. Yes. So now it's twice as effective, but it costs almost 3 times more. Also, if you use the magic missile enough, you can unlock a new magic missile of a different elemental variety that is actually useful. Digimon, as his second magic missile ability, he gets Petty Dart, which is exactly the same magic missile attack as Petty Eyes, but it does spooky damage, or dark damage, or purple damage, because this game never treats any of the elemental equilibriums to their full respect. Especially considering almost every enemy you actually fight in this game is actually heavily resistant to dark. Oh, I also haven't gotten to the point where I mentioned that in order for 100%, I actually have to max out the levels of all of the unlockable Digimon and unlock all of their magical abilities. Yeah, that's going to be fun when I get there. Oh yes, sirree, yes, yes. Yeah, so if you play this game at home and are following, playing along with me, do yourself a favor and just dupe the fuck out of the money, because it's very useful. Especially, the other thing I was doing that entire grinding session was collecting a lot of money so I can actually upgrade my gear this episode to not only the next tier, but also upgrading metal I think Metal Electromon or Electmon. The one that's always dubbed in English with a very poorly done Elvis accent. And in the Japanese dub, he's given an Elvis accent. But it's this long-running joke in the entire Digimon franchise that Etamon and Metal Etamon are actually completely based off of people who impersonate Elvis in Japan. And they managed to distill the entire subculture in not one but two Digimon. Hey, the more you know. So you can collect keychains, give them to a golden boy there, and he will give you a random item that's actually really good in either usability or really good just to sell for money. It really depends. But yep, and I upgraded to the Pain Scimitar. And I'm getting ready for the next dungeon and getting all the stuff I want before I kill the next boss, because, hey, I deserve it. I also, when playing the game, I realized dual-wielding weapons like this one are actually shit to kill bosses with. And that what you want is a one-handed weapon. Also, if you don't know, the reason why you want weapons with mods is because they can be modified with these items called chips or chippets, which you can put in the weapon to give it abilities and stat increases. But it's really hard to find a weapon with mods, and there's no way to add mods to an existing weapon. So you have to find one with mods, either in the store, which is what I recommend, or hope you get fucking lucky. But considering that the Pain Scimitar usually drops in World 3 and not World 2, you know, the second world, yeah. Hell, World 2 is only dropping the item loot table of World 1. But more high-valued items like armor boards than shitty weapons. And slightly better shitty weapons. All of them are trade fodder. So now we kill Skull Greymon. And I forgot to equip my new boss-killing weapon I got just before I decided to kill this bastard. And I just remembered to add it and build it. It has 3 mods, one less than the dual wielders, but you don't really need a lot of mods to begin with. It's just useful, especially if you're using the elemental power chips, which every boss is allergic to one contrived element. And any reptilian Digimon like Skull Greymon is allergic to ice, but it's also an undead Digimon, so it's also allergic to light, which you can only get if you're an Agumon or playing as one of the Holy Digimon. Yes, the entire wait, no. Light is Vmon. Vmon can only use light. I completely forget what the other Digimon can get because I never played them at all. Yeah, this game really is anti-you. Because everything you do in this game just shoots you in the foot later on in the game. Like, deciding to play a game that was heavily focused on multiplayer by myself, and that was made last minute, literally 3 months before this movie came out, exclusively on TV in Japan. Then got a shitty translation imported here in the United States. And it's one of the most worst-selling console games ever made. No, I take that back. It sold decent, but the return rate was high, and it was the most returned video game at GameStop, second to sports games. So, yeah, I think that's about the end of this chapter. Let me take a look at the bar here. Nope, I have a couple more minutes before this chapter ends. Yeah. Yeah, this game really doesn't respect your time at all. And that's going to be my constant catchphrase in this series. Because the deeper you get in this game, the more BS you have to scoop out with your bare hands to just continue playing the game. And that it's so heavily built on wasting your the time of a child that I wouldn't recommend playing this game at all unless you're trying to make a viral YouTube series playing it. So, yeah, you want to go to the next dungeon. And by the way, I'm actually, I did this 15 hours in multiple batches. And I kept the console on overnight. So, it actually took me 4 days to record 15 hours of footage of this game. Because, let's be honest, it's a chore to play this game, and you only want to play, at most, an hour at a time, or else you feel like you'd rather kill yourself instead. Yeah, this is one of those weird games, where it actively makes you fucking hate yourself the more you play it. But there isn't that many English-speaking YouTube channels with really good editing that actually show the gameplay, I mean the good majority of the gameplay, or the process of, 100%ing the game. So yeah, I also kind of want to do this as, my long-term plan for this channel is to do play hidden gems that not a lot of people know about, but have massive cult followings and deserve at least some sort of recognition, even in today's standard of video games. And, the whole indie game scene is, really good, especially if you're like me, who really likes to treasure video games as an art form, as sort of this new magnum opus of video game artistry. But it comes at its catches, because not every indie game is good, because not every genre is a stable platform to start off of, or ideals.
Chapter 4, Ancient Rubles. Chapter 5 Fuke the Tron.
Alrighty, to continue with the story here. We're done with all the dungeons, if memory serves correct, recording the audio over. So now we're going to have to prepare to take on the Big Bad Dungeon, which is the final dungeon of this area. And to do so, we must fuck around with a train for about 45 minutes in real time. And every vehicle section in this game is shit. This one, you have to memorize a pattern of switches you need to hit and dodging bullets, killing enemies. And if you miss any of those switches that you need to hit, it may or may not actually cause you to instantly die or waste another 30 minutes. But you need to hit a specific pattern I completely forget, but in many guides I read before doing this segment, from memory, is 3, 2, 1. And you want to do those with the blue switches, but I tried that and it changed. It's not the same every time. It also changes slightly with each difficulty, and it also changes depending on which print batch the game you have came from, which is interesting. And like I said, if you mess up, instant fucking death. And it's very comedic because it drops a 10,000 ton anvil on top of you and the train. And it does 0 damage to the train, but it instantly kills you. Oh, and in all vehicle segments, you can't use items to heal yourself. Oh, in the boat segment, it wasn't your health bar, it was the boat's health bar, despite you being the hitbox for the boat. Which I'm not going to question why that was a mechanic, but for the train, the game's reasoning to why you couldn't use items on the train, despite, you actually being a character riding the train, and the train wasn't getting directly damaged, you are, is that the train's moving so fast that if you were to use an item, the item would activate where you activated it. And since you're moving so fast, the item would do its effect 15 feet behind you. That's the basics of the reasoning here. Is items don't... when you use an item, it doesn't stick to your position. It sticks to the position where you activated it. Which is actually pretty fucking odd, in my opinion. Because what it's stating is, it shouldn't heal you if you're moving. But, as you've seen in previous footage of me playing this game, that is not a thing. Oh well, but the train could be going faster than what the item you activate can follow you. But you want to kill the enemies here as soon as you can, because they can actually stun lock you. Oh, and they have a nasty poison effect, which is also something you want to avoid. But the train segment and boat segment are literally some of the worst parts of this game, besides all of the side quests, because, well, the side quests are the worst. I say all the vehicle sections are second worst. And in a lot of older games, they sort of threw in mini games here and there to, break up the pacing of the game and kind of make the player not bored of the game, to encourage them to play the game longer. But RPGs don't do that typically, unless their demographic is for children. But when you get to this point where you need to jump over the high bars that are electric, you need to hit that, and then you go into the power plant segment and also hit that one. And yeah, power plant right now. And what you want to do after you wait for the loading screen to occur is heal yourself a couple of times and kill every one of those blinking beacons. And if you go up all the way to the top here, yeah, right there to the right, you can actually see where you could overlook this area in World 1 as sort of a bit of foreshadowing as well as a hint, as well as further connecting these places. But in my opinion, what they were attempting to do didn't do that well. So now, what you'd want to do is find all 5 of the hidden switches, turn them on, and then make your way to the final boss dungeon. And yeah, I mentioned in a previous segment, by the way, this recording's recorded a while after the previous recording, so I'm going off of memory. But the memory is, I know, so this game is mostly walking, literally walking and punishing you for not finding a very cryptic item in the game to allow you to progress forward. And every section in this game has what I call the fuck you switch system, which if you don't turn on all the switches and go to the dungeon, if you didn't find all the switches, the game says fuck you. You need to either A, go back to spawn and backtrack all the way, or B, walk all the way back there yourself. But some of the sections are only one-way sections, meaning you can only go one way. Also, as a reminder, enemies with crowns are boss enemies. I mean, mini-boss enemies, not boss enemies. But depending on the color of the crown that they have, increases the danger level of the enemy. I forget exactly, but yellow is a 100% multiplier. Green, I think, is a 200% multiplier. Blue is a 300% multiplier. And orange is a 500% multiplier. But yeah, and you kind of want to be a little over leveled in this game. Because if you're doing it in single player, it just makes everything easier and makes you less likely to have to die. And dying in this game is a huge fucking pain in the ass. Unlike Dark Souls, for example, that's actually a balanced system to fuck you over for dying. And the thing is, in that game, I mean, a lot of games have something known as checkpoints. This game doesn't know what a fucking checkpoint is. It is essentially what you could call a waypoint, but it's only one way and you can only use it once. And I think that's what they're called. But that's not a waypoint, in my opinion. That's just one way rigmarole uh, filler buffer. That's the end of this.
Chapter 6, Barricado of Dome.
Alrighty, I misspoke in the previous segment. Apparently, we're not at the final dungeon yet. At least I think, unless that takes almost an entire hour. Oh, wait, nope. It is. It is the final dungeon. So, the thing is with this dungeon is it has a fuckload of turrets, and they're a new type of turret. They're called, and I call them the Mega Fuck You Howitzers. And they are almost, I mean, they're literally anti tank artillery. That's the best way to describe them. And you actually need to kill all of them on your way through here, or else they can instantly kill you like that. And now I have to walk all the way back from the beginning. And yeah. So, like I said, I pretty much spoke that into death of how punishing dying is in this game. Not only do you have to revive your own corpse to get the money you had, but you also permanently lose about 15% of the experience to the next level you had. Just permanently deleted. Which is just rubbing a lot of salt in the wound in single player. Because you're usually very over leveled. And I sort of over leveled just a tad because there isn't any good grinding areas in World 3. So my plan is not to grind a whole lot in World 3 as I go through this LP. But I plan to 100% this game. Like I said multiple times, but as I play this game, I realize how much of a time sink it is. And just playing this game to begin with, it's torture. And the reason why I stopped doing active commentary is there's a whole bunch of just what I like to call rambly bullshit. And at times, one just starts thinking out loud. Also, don't expect World 3 come for a while, because I plan to remaster the first part of the series. And do it in this format. And yeah. So, make our way through here again with all the death traps and all the turrets respawned. And the thing is, the interesting thing, turrets aren't considered traps. They're actually in their own category, known as angry defense. And they respawn no matter what in an item zone like an enemy. So essentially, they're just a stationary enemy. That's how they're coded. Pretty much. And thing is, we're not even in the dungeon yet. We're actually in the garden, per se. And you can actually snipe them with your magic. And now we're actually in the gate now.
Chapter 7 Mellow Myotismon Manor.
Alright, now we just entered the front gate of this place. And if you didn't go through the train section, the game will essentially hold up the middle finger and instantly kill your fucking ass right here as soon as you enter. Until pretty practically just telling you, hey, in order to negate and turn off this giant fucking death nuke, you need to go do the train section because fuck you, and you have to start over from the beginning. And the thing is, I would like to show that off if it didn't take me an hour to get here in real time. Yeah, movement speed is a godsend in this game. And it's a huge pain in the arse when every weapon negatively affects your movement speed, even the stock weapons. I wish I was joking, by the way, but a lot of this game is pretty much fuck you, play the game. Shut up for a while. But we're also not in the real dungeon yet, because we need to destroy all these antennae. And if you don't destroy all these antennas before you get into the boss room, also I found this out after I destroyed the third antenna, but each one of them can practically nuke you if you're in multiplayer level. And with my overleveledness, it practically takes 2/3 of my maximum health. And I didn't realize that's what they were doing, was, almost killing me. I thought all of a sudden the enemies learned how to kill me. But if you don't explode all these antennaes, the front door doesn't open. But in an earlier version of the game, if you didn't destroy all the antennaes, the boss of this dungeon would just have an instant nuke kill you, like he does in the entrance. But in just before launch, they removed that and in favor for you can't go in unless you kill all of those, because they already had too many fuck yous in this dungeon. So now we're actually in the dungeon now. Oh. Let me tell you, dying in this fucking place, that's almost 3 hours to actually get to the actual door of the dungeon. And that's assuming if you die once. And this area has an overuse of Phantomon. And hell, I think in one point in this dungeon they actually use a Phantomon as a mini boss. But it's pretty jarring because you have to kill him, but his teleport's tripled and he has a flame blast, a huge one. But this dungeon sort of suffers from what I call the glitchy corner law. Practically every little doorway here has a decorative pillar, which you can actually get, your hitbox can easily get caught on. And they usually put a death trap right there where you get caught. And it's only like 3 pixels of your hitbox actually getting caught on the doorway. Also, this dungeon also suffers a lot from backtrack-itis, where you go all the way to this end of the dungeon to hit a switch to open a door on the completely opposite side of the dungeon without any telling of you, the player, that something on the opposite side of the dungeon opened. But this place is just a giant forgettable maze like all the other dungeons, but slightly more irritatingly deadly. Yeah. I think I just used 2 words that probably weren't ever thought of being used in that conjunction or that conjecture. But yeah, a lot of the rooms in this dungeon also suffer from uh, tiny enemies in a giant room. And the door to the next room won't open until you kill all the little enemies. But all the little enemies aren't on screen because they're like on the other side of the room and you can't tell unless you go through there. Also, if you're a Duramon, you have to be really careful about the fire traps because they count as fire damage. And if you're Geomon, you have to be really careful about the lasers because they count as light damage. And Geomon is allergic to light because he's a virus type. Something that actually makes sense in this game. Until you consider that Duramon is not an ice-type Digimon, but a beast metal empire, which essentially means that he's a dragon beast that can digivolve in the future to something that has metal in its body design. Yeah, Digimon is actually very interesting lore behind it. And practically every Digimon has their own in-depth page. And it's pretty much almost as compelling as SCPs, you know those. Practically each and every Digimon has their own in-depth lore, like an SCP, but they don't have, little stories for them. Because it's just world building. They're just building. It's an IP. It's essentially just a fantasy world with rules and guidelines for other people to come in, borrow these ideas, and make a story within it with the full help of the IP owner. Yeah. So, I mean, that's pretty much all, I mean, every Digimon series and video game. Also, another interesting thing, this game and the vast majority of games on the PlayStation are not actually part of the multiverse canon. Canon. They are canon, but they're not canon. Yeah, I know that sentence doesn't make sense. But, yeah. So, yeah, pretty much this world of Digimon World, World 2 of Digimon World 4 brings out a lot of nitpicky gripes of the entire design of this game. Also, in every dungeon, they have these hidden two-player exclusive rooms that you can only open up if you have multiple players. But like I said, in this climate, you're more likely to catch a very bad head cold than find someone who actually is willing to play this game multiplayer with you. Oh, and for the PlayStation 2, in order to play 4 players on a PS2, you actually have to get a very rare add-on. So if you're playing this game at home, I heavily recommend that you stay a hell away from the PS2 version of this game and get it on the GameCube or Xbox. But considering the Xbox can just randomly die on you, you might be better off with a GameCube because those actually have very good longevity until the silicon rots. But hell, I have a GameCube. It still works, and someone else used it before me. A complete stranger. But yeah, they actually made. I mean, GameCube is probably your best retro console for multi-platform games like this one that especially use local co-op as a main selling feature. Or in this game, a fucking necessity if you actually want to have fun with this game. Okay. Also, if you ask me, another gripe of just this entire area in general is the fucking Minotaur mod. Because you have a chance to instantly kill them, but when you kill them, they have a chance to actually give themselves a full heal, doubling their maximum health and increasing the damage they do. But yeah. And just the power scope of this game from memory of watching huge amounts of LPs on this game to try and beat this game as a kid in single player exclusively. The power scope in this game is fucking abysmal. And some may say lazy. Oh, and this is what I was talking about earlier. That Phantomon was a mini boss. It was set up like a mini boss in the middle of the dungeon. Oh, so this here is your pit stop. Essentially, what you do at every pit stop in this game is empty out all your inventory so you can make stocks, and then bank all the stocks you got in your bank account. Because if you die, you have a potential chance of deleting all of it, unless it's items to sell. Then you also buy item discs that you depleted. But in this part of the game, when you have petty heal light, you can convert mana into great quantities of health. And also, I sort of sort out the good loot because part of my made up criteria to 100%ing the game is building all the characters in a unique way, different from each other in some manner. And I'm just collecting all those modded items as leveling gear for them later. Because I haven't gotten into the digivolving system in this game, despite it just stealing the name of Digivolution, when actually what it is just a character swap. And at any time, you can actually swap your main character out for a different character. And once you get that character to level 18, you can unlock the next one, and it starts off with the quad trio. Oh, and the other thing you want to do here is occasionally dump money into the junk shop, because you can get some really good loots out of there. But you can't mod farm that like you can the shops. But instead, it'll give you good, guaranteed loot every time you walk in. That, and for World 3, you need a very specific item from him, which I will talk more about in the episode where we do that. Also, besides putting the bits in the bank and later leveling loot in the bank, when that's going, I'm going to explain what all of the criteria are for this playthrough. Long term, I need to unlock all of the characters on the start menu and unlock all of the magic abilities that each one has and grind them up to max level. And the thing is, the catch is, every time you start a new character in this game within the same profile, it starts at level 1, but you have everything else. You have all your GG items. You just can't equip any of them. You're literally starting over in the game, minus the vast amount of resources you have accumulated thus far. And the thing is, I recommend not using any data. Unless it's chips, especially if you're doing what I'm doing. But this game is mostly overinflated numbers that pretty much mean nothing in the overall schemes of things, but only give you small bonuses compared to other items. But the only stats that truly matter in this game is damage, health, MP if you use MP a lot like I am, and damage resistances and elemental weaknesses. Which This game actually sort of sets up a magic system to encourage you to learning the elemental weaknesses of your enemies and then exploiting them. But in single player, you can't. Because every Digimon has their own elemental strengths and weaknesses. For example, Duramon is Ice, Darkness, and Venom, which Venom isn't actually a damage. In this game, it's just a sub variety of Dark, if memory serves correct. So, that and the magic system is also a little skewed. For example, Magic Ice Missile, also known as the Petty Ice or Ice category of magic skills that Duramon can learn. Once you upgrade it by using it into Greater Ice, which allows it to shoot 2 missiles at the cost of 3, but they do 150% more damage than the original version. So now it costs 3 times as much, but does 3 times the damage, but also has twice the amount of projectiles, meaning it can hit up to 2 more enemies. But if they both home in on the same enemy, considering that enemies also have invincibility frames, but you don't, it's the second shot is mostly wasted. So it's only doing at most half the damage that it's actually supposed to do. Oh, and thank God we're at the platforming. Also, I don't know if I said this before, but the platforming in this game is heavily against you. And they just added the platforming last minute to make dungeons harder. And this segment here is probably one of the biggest examples of bullshit platforming in this game. And sometimes they like to change the rules now and again for things like that multiple times. But what I was saying with Petty Ice is, the magic is, most of the time you're actually better off using your new Petty Magic Missile instead of your Greater Magic Missile. Because literally the homing AI is a little bit of horseshit, but is only viable in huge groups of enemies, in my opinion. But if you're using Magic Missile in huge groups of enemies, sometimes they both home in on the same enemy, which happens to be closest to the Magic Missile. And the Magic Missile automatically homes into the closest enemy to it. So it's just this weird logic loop that sort of bites itself in the arse. Also, an interesting thing, Phantomon are slightly resistant to the bind ability because they sometimes teleport out of it. But when you hit them with it, they no longer can teleport, so it makes them easier to deal with. Also, if you use Petty Bind on the Minotaurmon, it actually makes them easier to handle. And the fact that you can just essentially block them from getting their magic super serum, or steroids in my opinion, and kill them before they even get a chance to walk over to it and become invincible for 30 seconds, and then come out twice as harmful to you. But took me a while to realize. See, not all dungeons are built the same, but the vast majority of them follow a similar rule in that they don't force you back and double back out of platforming rooms like that one. Because most platforming rooms mean that it's close to the door of the final boss. And I'm making sure I didn't backtrack here because it's literally a mirrored version of what the previous setup was. I wanted to make sure I wasn't backtracking because a lot of the dungeons in this game love to do that. Sort of question your sanity in, hey, this looks so familiar. Am I backtracking by accident? Which happens a lot to me. In World One, in the first level of this game, I accidentally backtracked out of the end dungeon twice. But this sort of brings up one of the points I want to do with this channel is the long-term goal is to make this sort of honorable games, where I just talk about how good games are and examples of how games made it good things, and that how we should learn and incorporate some of the mechanics within those games within different games or basic examples of how not to make a game. This game has one of the biggest examples of this is how not to make a dungeon. And the entire game is so how not to balance a game. Yeah, there's actually a lot that you can learn about this game and how not to make a shit game. And one of the things to make a good game is a decent story, which this game doesn't have. But what this game lacks in good story, it definitely makes up in the fact that it's literally one of the worst PlayStation 2 games ever made. And the only people that play this are people who are following the nostalgia effect who were forced to play this game as a kid. But, yeah. So, it took me a while to find where I was going. Because this dungeon, you could be walking in circles and not know it. Or you could be just randomly walking around thinking you're walking in circles when actually you found the end dungeon. And now we get to the boss of this zone. Finally. By the way, this part is sped up by 500%, so keep that in mind. So the time that I spent talking about this dungeon and how shit it is, imagine, in real time, it actually took 5 times as long as it is in video. And this boss is a really good example of sort of the opposite philosophy and downside that the first boss of the game had, the first big bad boss. The first big bad boss suffered from cluster fuckitis, where you had very little room to work with, And in order to dodge that boss's attacks was to, either move directly into a damage source or eat it. Which I certainly did because I underestimated how unoptimized this game was. Also, I remembered midway into the first part of this boss to actually equip the boss killer I built, which is just a one-handed weapon, which, an odd thing, one-handed weapons actually have a lower movement speed penalty than other weapons in the game. So I can actually move faster and thus dodge telegraphed attacks easier. But this boss suffers from the exact opposite of what the previous big bad boss had, which was a Pokemon, which is the arena is too big. Hell, I know, if you can see, I actually was trying to use ranged attacks on it, but literally, the ranged attacks were despawning because they're only supposed to go a certain amount of range, where the PS2 just stops rendering items, especially with this game. So, if you make a huge arena like this for a boss and you have a limited range on ranged weapons like this, and punish the player for using ranged abilities by, not allowing them to use the ranged abilities.
Chapter 8 BS to unlock next soon. And shite star.
So, like I was saying in the previous section, that boss suffered from the arena was too big, and punishes by. I mean, the thing is, the whole point of a big arena like that is to allow the player to use ranged attacks. But if the area is so big that the ranged attacks time out before they actually can damage the boss, then it completely defeats the point of using a huge arena like that. Despite, so that entire boss, unlike a Pokemon, which was made to kill you, that boss was sort of more a time waster and pissing into the wind than a Pokemon. So now we're cleaning out the inventory from the second half of the dungeon, and we're going to talk to the NPCs to initiate the story McJargon bullshit, which you have to do, but they don't tell you which NPC you're supposed to talk to initiate the next gameplay section. The next story progression. And it's, so essentially, I mostly ran around looking for an NPC I have not seen before to initiate the next bit of the story, and this time it was Leomon, who moved areas. Now Leomon for the rest of the game is there, and a lot of that is actually pretty forgettable. So keep in mind, Leomon is, so they moved Leomon and he made him a story NPC again, Which, if you haven't seen the first part of this series, which I plan to remaster soon after this uploads, uh, Leomon got kidnapped, and I had to go save him. It was this whole ordeal, and interestingly enough, the Leomon in this universe never dies, despite in every Digimon depiction. Leomon always fucking dies. Oh yeah, it's the same way in all the anime depictions. Not a lot of video games actually use that as a plot point, interestingly enough. But now we talk to him. Another red alert's happening, and we have to go dick around with the terminals again, if memory serves correct, like we did to unlock a Seraftimon. Or uh, it just unlocked the next zone. Ah, yes, that's it. Well, the next zone is Venom Swamp. Venom Swamp, which is actually one of the most useless names of a zone, because unlike all of the previous zone names, it was so vague it didn't actually tell you what to expect in that zone. You know, Death Valley. None of that, none of what's in Death Valley actually sort of fits with that name. Dry Desert doesn't make you suspect that you're going to be fighting mummies and all that. And I'm going to be talking. So I'm going to be talking in the void here for a little bit. But yeah, the names of all the zones up to this point aren't, derogative of what the area is. Death Valley was so vague it didn't make you expect what you actually saw there. Hell, half the time in that area, in that zone, it didn't look like a valley to me. It looked more like a gulch or canyon than dry desert. Yes, it's a dry desert, but it doesn't, notify you that it's heavily technological. It has a train. It has a giant nuke dungeon. It has satellite antenna arrays that explode, and they're also a mini nuke that could almost kill you. It's filled with mummies, like most Egyptian deserts. The mazes are filled with minotaur. You don't get that from dry desert. Venom Swamp, on the other hand, it's literally a venom swamp. It's just a poisonous swamp. There's no better way, but that area, the name didn't. So up to this point, the names of the areas were actually unique in a way that it made you expect the opposite of what the area was. But they just sort of shat the bed with Venom Swamp. Well, that's it for this episode. See you guys next time on the remake of the first chapter of this LP. I'll see you guys later. Please like and subscribe, and share if you would. Lets me know that you actually like watching the series, and lets YouTube know that other people might actually like to watch this series. Oh, that's the end.